liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, June 27th, 2024. Time for another show. Time for a presidential debate, if you can believe it. It seems like a little early for that, doesn't it? Well, it is. And yet, here we go. We're going to have one. I mean, I think we're going to have one. It's the day of, and I don't know. I guess speculation on whether or not Donald Trump is going to show has cooled and turned over instead to, do we expect that he's going to actually adhere to the rules or whatever? I don't know. I'm not certain where we are in that kind of expectations game. I think we've just sort of shifted into the normal expectation games, which is terrible because, of course, that means people are, to the extent that they're just waking up to the fact that there's going to be a debate, and who could blame you? You're reading coverage of, well, you know, all Biden has to do is that, and all Trump has to, but what it comes down to, of course, is all that Biden has to do is appear competent. And I mean, well, he is competent, so that shouldn't be too hard. Whereas for Trump, all he has to do is essentially, I mean, everything from, all he has to do is not scream, to not poop his pants, to just make it look generally like he knows where he is. Of course, the lowest possible expectations for him. Meanwhile, their team is out in force insisting, oh yeah, you know, totally going to be jacked up on the drugs. Of course, Biden is what they're saying. What they mean, of course, is we will. And I don't know what to tell you about it. I mean, I'm kind of tired of covering that aspect of it. Coin toss as to whether or not I make any active effort to watch the debate. All the clips will be circulated, and all the outrage will be circulated via social media. I don't actually have to directly expose myself to this debate in order to know what's going on. I guess that's one of the pleasures of modern life. But a few days ago, there was some interest expressed in the household about watching this thing. How is he even going to debate? I want to see what he's going to do and what kind of meltdown, if any, he has. In this house, the expectation is that Trump won't be able to put on the performance that he needs to put on. But I am used to seeing him not put on that performance and then just, you know, life goes on. People write terrible things about him. His team writes amazing things about him. He was fantastic. It was a win like no one has ever seen before. It was generally regarded as having fallen on his face, but hey, what can you do? So I guess people are instead spending their time speculating on whether or not he will attempt to circumvent the rules, whether or not you'll be able to hear him on studio microphones screaming over his own microphone having been turned off, whether or not he will walk over and try and seethe behind Biden while he speaks, as he once did with Hillary Clinton, which is an astonishing thing to have to remember. All of these things. Now, in the meantime, the Supreme Court is falling apart rapidly. They are attempting to, I guess, pull the cord and eject and get out of town and get rid of all of the, what are there, still like 10 plus cases still pending. Yesterday was a wild day, including what appears to have been a mistaken publication of something that they didn't mean to publish until later on because of the kind of case disposition it was. But it's a story in itself. And Greg, I know, is very interested in this, was sending notes early this morning. He's all about the Supreme Court activity from yesterday, the DIG, the DIG. This is such an interesting thing. One, the fact that it even exists, and two, the fact that article after article being written about it with literally no one stopping to point out, does anyone know what DIG stands for? Just so we know when it comes around, because Greg is definitely charged up to talk about this, unless he's worked it all out for himself and feels like, all right, well, I talked to myself about it in Skype and I'm fine with it. What is it? Is it, I can't even remember now, dismissal as improvidently granted. So, yeah, that's a new one for me, I think. I don't know if I've ever come across that one before, but we're learning all about the procedural tools that the court has got to avoid doing things that it doesn't want to do, or to avoid going on the record with things that they don't want to do. The shadow docket has been something people have been talking about lately, and we learned about dismissed as improvidently granted. Now a new thing, which I'll let Greg describe the whole thing. But just so you know, when the discussion comes up, because it wasn't immediately obvious, and I mean, my guess based on the context was, well, the D seems to be for dismissed, or perhaps denied, but it is actually dismissed. And I just want you to have that in mind when it gets around, because I scanned like 3, 4, 5 of the articles that got sent, and some of the other ones that hadn't been sent, and was just looking for where do they actually, usually right up at the top, you see the acronym, and then they explain the acronym, and then they go on to use the acronym, and no one was explaining it. So there you have it. Dismissed as improvidently granted. We'll let Greg discuss that one when the time comes. But there are a number of other decisions that have been rendered, many of which are equally strange and unbecoming of the Supreme Court, but that's the kind of people they are. Meanwhile, other strange procedural tricks underway. A couple of things that I guess have been waiting in pocket and haven't actually, I don't know whether they made the air or not, but I have difficulty remembering whether we covered this. Did we blurt this out at some point? Although I feel like it might have dropped on a Friday after the show one time, and I pocketed it and never got back to it. But did I mention to you that the Attorney General of, is it Missouri? I'm going to have to open it up. And, looks like the server doesn't want to work for me. That's interesting. But it is the Attorney General of, I think, Missouri, as I recall, although now I want to see if I can look through it. And interestingly, once again, major, am I missing this basic fact? Missing from this story is who is the person we're talking about. Maybe I'll have to open up their tweet. But Attorney General Andrew Bailey, and I guess now I'll have to verify it, filing suit. I guess I'll verify the state after this. Filing suit against the state of New York on the grounds that the prosecution of Donald Trump for the 34 counts for which he was found guilty. I do think we might have made this onto the air. That this itself was in fact election interference, just simply prosecuting him. States prosecuting someone who's running for president is federal election interference, period, unless, of course, you're prosecuting a Democrat, in which case it's just fine. I mean, is it not election interference for the feds to have been prosecuting Bob Menendez this whole time? I doubt very much whether he would bring that case. But it also may be the case that he's not bringing this case for real in New York either. It may just be entirely a stunt, which is the theme of public notice and the public notice Substack-ish sort of thing here, although it looks to me like Pocket tells me that this one is written by Judd Legum, who usually writes over at, Popular Info. And yet when I try and open the original, it's just not having it. So I don't know whether this is just attributing what is usually Aaron Rupar's work to Judd Legum for some strange reason, or whether Judd actually wrote this one for Rupar's team on this. And if so, what does that mean for Popular Info? I don't know. Anyway, there you have it. I just wanted to put that one out there just in case you somehow missed that one, and we can talk about it a little bit later. All right, let's see. A couple of other items that jump out, including the fact that, I don't know, some of these stories are not open. I'm a little worried now that stories aren't opening out of Pocket. Maybe they left AI in charge, and we're never going to, be able to figure this thing out. Lots of other strange procedural happenings as well. We have discussed in the last couple of days with Joan McCarter the weird efforts that the House is making in the contempt area, while they are bending over backwards to try to find a way to hold Merrick Garland in contempt by using the old inherent contempt procedure, which we once discussed many moons ago. At the same time, they are looking for a new, well, it's not even all that new, a procedural way to dismiss the already charges of contempt of Congress for Steve Bannon, who has already for some time now been convicted of that contempt of Congress and is supposed to be reporting to prison by Monday. The House, under the leadership, I guess you could say, of Mike Johnson, actually searching for ways to intervene from another branch entirely and prevent this from happening. I'll update you on all of the details of that perhaps later on. Greg Dworkin is here now, and my morning reporting, I've been sleuthing around looking for stories, and the breaking news is Greg Dworkin is very interested in the happenings at the Supreme Court yesterday. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. Yeah, there's some weird stuff going on for sure.
Wee. I don't. What kind of weird sound effects do I have? I don't know. I got something, and well, here we go. How about that?
Yeah, pretty cuckoo.
That'll help us. Okay, very good.
But what's also pretty cuckoo, I mean, it has to be said, and maybe you'll say it later. But Mike Johnson is a really terrible speaker, and the thing is, because he's a mediocre white man, the bar is so low that they write him up as if he's effective. I mean, it's the stupidest thing in the world. When you step back and think about it, who is it that subpoenaed Steve Bannon?
The January 6th committee.
So Congress.
Yes, them. Right, those guys. Eagle, flag.
So Mike Johnson is trying to get the House to pass something that says Congress doesn't have the right to do what Congress did. I mean, he's trying to limit his own power.
Essentially, no.
But at the same time, he wants he wants to subpoena Merrick Garland. I don't understand.
Yes and no, and let me tell you, Noah's Ark. I mean, the guy wants to build the big Noah's Ark, and nothing's going to make sense after that.
I get that, but it's just stupid.
Yeah, no, it is. It's awfully. Well, it's a very intriguing idea in that. But the ship has sailed. But yes, this is a contempt of Congress. And then he woke up just, I guess, yesterday and realized, oh, I'm Congress, or at least I'm in Congress. I don't feel like he was contemptuous of us. Can we essentially say, well, hi, this is a contempt of Congress case, and I'm speaking for Congress, which is dubious all by itself. And I'm not insulted by this. So how about we don't put him in jail because we think he's not in contempt? Now, the court may say it's too late now, no matter what the reasoning is, or they may even go into something and say, well, the Congress that you're speaker of is a different Congress than the one that had him convicted of contempt. You can't go back and uncontempt it. You can change the law.
So wait, let me understand this, because we're going to get to this later when it comes to the Supreme Court.
Sure, why not?
But you're telling me.
I'm not telling you.
That Mike Johnson is trying to dig this contempt thing.
Yes. Yes, essentially. He's saying, look, we're the Congress that they were talking about in that contempt of Congress. Now, that's not true.
Dig. What is dig? Dig is dismissed because it was improvidentially granted.
Yes, right. That's the definition of the
so man, like, wow, this is really cool. I dig it. I don't grok it, but I dig it.
Right,
so, like, I want to dig
this. That's the acronym.
This.
I don't know if I've ever really run into that acronym. I mean, this is...
I haven't until now, but boy, have I in the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
So let's get to that.
Okay. I mean,
that's what Mac Johnson is trying to do. He's trying to undo what Congress did, and you can't do that.
I mean, you can in the statutory sense, but yeah, I mean, this is a huge problem and a huge separation of powers problem too, right? This has now been handed over to both the executive branch that prosecuted the case and the judicial branch that handled it, and they're
he has
trying to
no
grab
control
it back.
Over those things. He can't do
that. No, and they may tell him that. On the other hand, there's this weird thing happening at the Supreme Court where nothing matters. LOL, YOLO, nothing matters.
Nothing happens. I mean, it's weird. So let's talk about some of the cases. The first case, and again,
let me go to your notes.
For your listeners, I have to always point out I am not a lawyer. Everything I'm looking at is from a layman's point of view. David can correct me when I get it wrong.
I don't know. Maybe.
There were a couple of cases. There were 2+1 cases yesterday.
That's a good way of putting it, yes.
The two
not
cases.
Three,
not
2
three,
plus 1.
but there were 2+1.
Right. Why?
Because 2 of them we have a solution, and 1 was accidentally leaked.
Yeah, I think so.
And the accidental leak, it really was an accident, but what happened is they put out the results of a case that they were not ready to announce. So we'll get to the +1 in a bit, because that's in many ways the most interesting.
Although they weren't even going to announce anything. I mean, they were going to announce that they had nothing to announce.
They had nothing to announce, but it went up on the site, and Bloomberg, I guess, uses a scraper to sort of pick up anything that gets there. And they were able to get the information before it was pulled back. And then basically the publishing branch of the Supreme Court apologized and said we shouldn't have put that up yet.
Hear ye, hear ye. Oops.
So what about the cases that we do know about? Well,
first
of
all,
those
first.
I think the less important case is the bribery case.
I mean,
and on the scale of things, if that was the only one that got decided by some corrupt justices, I could live with it. What happened is that the Supreme Court decided in its infinite wisdom that they were going to make a distinction between a bribe, like Bob Menendez, and a gratuity, which is what your Governor McDonnell was accused, convicted, and then reversed on.
I think so. Yes.
And the Supreme Court, since that McDonnell case, has really tried to say politics allows a lot of give and take, back and forth. We don't like to call it quid quo pro because that makes it sound not only Latin but evil.
Right.
And so we'll allow a lot of stuff,
including quo pro
particularly
quid.
When it comes to Clarence Thomas. But in general, we'll just allow a lot of stuff when it comes to politics. And this is one of those cases. And I saw some pretty smart legal guys who I generally agree with who looked at this and said, based on the wording, because remember, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm allowed to say some of the weasel word lawyering stuff that they do, gratuity versus bribe, they said, the language is such that I'm not totally sure how I would have voted on this, although, when push comes to shove, probably against bribery because that's common sense.
Yes. Maybe.
So, okay, fine.
I don't know how you tell which one is which. They think they can.
Yeah, they think they can understand the difference between a gratuity and a bribe. Menendez was a bribe. And he wasn't indicted under the same statute that they were trying to rule on here.
Okay. Well, that's a good way of differentiating.
So it doesn't let Menendez off the hook, in other words.
What?
If anybody thinks that, it doesn't.
I can. What if?
I'll bet he tries anyway.
I dig it does.
Yeah. Well,
there you go.
So then
I don't know.
The next case was really interesting. And part of the interesting thing was how it was covered.
All right.
Okay. So let's just do the AP version of it first. Right. And this is a case called Murthy. That's the Surgeon General.
Okay.
Plural, Surgeons General.
Yes.
And the Surgeon General said, Facebook and you other social media things, when it comes to horse paste and dewormer for dogs, we really don't want you to put a lot of COVID misinformation out there. And your very own guidelines say you really shouldn't do that. Misinformation isn't good according to your own guidelines. So why don't you take a look at this and see if you can apply it here? And Facebook looked at it and said, yeah, we can.
Right.
So in its infinite wisdom, state of Missouri, decided it was going to sue the Biden administration over this because they were silencing conservative voices.
Oh, dumb ones, but
wait. So it gets better.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to differentiate between
This is what Murthy
voices.
versus Missouri, Murthy v. Missouri says. This is directly from the document cloud. Under their long-standing content moderation policy, social media platforms have taken a range of actions to suppress certain categories of speech, including speech they judge to be false and misleading. In 2020, with the outbreak of COVID, the platforms announced that they would enforce these policies against users who post false and misleading content about the pandemic. The platforms also applied misinformation policies during the 2020 election season. During that period, and this is an important part of it because AP didn't really cover this well, Various federal officials regularly spoke with the platforms about COVID and election-related misinformation. For example, White House officials publicly and privately called on the platforms to do more to address vaccine misinformation. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, hence the title of the case, issued a health advisory that encouraged the platforms to take steps to prevent COVID-19 misinformation from taking hold. Valiant attempt didn't work. COVID misinformation took hold, but the CDC alerted the platforms to COVID-19 misinformation trends, flagged example posts, and then here is the key that I want you to focus on because the AP didn't. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, there's a mouthful for you, communicated with the platforms about election-related misinformation in advance of 2020 and 2022. Respondents are 2 states and 5 individual social media users, one of whom I'll get to in detail.
Cat turd?
No.
I'm just wondering.
Jim
I love
Hoff,
when they
Gateway Pundit.
Okay. I love when they have to, the news and the courts have to say, well, Cat turd said, okay. Yeah. It's your fault.
Who sued dozens of executive branch officials and agencies. Now, I don't know if Cat turd was part of this, but
probably.
Jim Hoff was.
Yeah,
and he has a backstory there.
Gateway Pundit.
Alleging that the government pressured the platforms to censor their speech in violation of the First Amendment. Following extensive discovery, the district court,
trial
the
court.
The lower court, issued an injunction.
How dare you? Right.
The Fifth Circuit, the Cuckoo Court, affirmed in part and reversed in part. They held that both the state plaintiffs and the individual plaintiffs had Article 3 standing to seek injunctive relief.
Sure, they're good at that.
But the Supreme Court looked at it and said, nah, they don't.
No.
There is no standing here.
How odd.
And so we reverse it, we remand it, we send it back.
Yeah.
Which is a win for Biden because he gets to do what he does. But the way that the AP wrote it up is Supreme Court rules for Biden sided with the Biden administration in a dispute with Republican-led states over how far the federal government can go to combat controversial social media posts, including COVID-19. Oh, and by the way, election security. So they made it sound like this was Biden versus the states. But that's not the interesting part of it. And it's only half of what was going on, and the AP completely missed it.
No.
Okay? So I take you to the New Republic, where they took the same case, the same story, and they write it up like this. Supreme Court nukes Hunter Biden laptop conspiracy. In brutal ruling.
That does sound different.
Even the conservative Supreme Court thinks the far right's FBI conspiracy theory is ridiculous. And what happened here, remember FBI, remember the cybersecurity, this, that, and everything else. Turned out there's this nutcase blogger named Jim Hoft who does Gateway Pundit, failing site. Okay.
Yes.
And he got a hold of pictures that were purported to be from the Hunter Biden laptop.
Yes, including pictures of his actual lap.
And they decided that they were going to publish this. And the way that they got around, well, you don't own this and it's purloined material, is Jim Hoft got his brother to do so. I don't know if he tweeted it or whether he put it on some other social media. And then Jim Hoft took that, his brother's material, and posted it as if, he had the right to do that. So the way that TNR writes this up is the Supreme Court issued a surprising decision finding the complaints that the Biden administration had forced censorship on conservative social media were unfounded. In its 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court laid a death blow, in particular, to the conspiracy theory that the FBI forced social media companies to suppress stories about Hunter Biden's laptop. One of the main conspiracy theories that had kept conservatives in a chokehold for the past 3 years is the FBI forced social media companies to remove content discussing Hunter Biden's laptop to protect the Bidens. In reality, social media companies cracked down on the dissemination of photos purporting to have come from Biden's laptop in accordance with their boilerplate hacked materials policy, which enforced against dissemination of content obtained through illegal means such as revenge porn. That enforcement resulted in the removal of posts discussing Biden's laptop that included photos, but discussions of the laptop were not restricted. Now, one plaintiff in the Supreme Court case was Jim Hoft, founder of the failing far-right conspiracy website Gateway Pundit. Hoft elevated, when I say failing, it's going bankrupt. Hoft elevated the FBI interference conspiracy and claimed moderation efforts taken by Twitter caused him harm. Hoft embedded Twitter posts made by his brother Joe Hoft, sharing photos claiming to be from Biden's laptop. Twitter suspended Hoft's account, Joe Hoft, which resulted in the post embedded on Gateway Pundit turning up as dead links. Jim Hoft sued, saying, "You're doing me harm."
You can sue for dead links now.
Right. The Supreme Court meticulously ripped these claims to shreds, hilariously sourcing Hoft's own claims that the crackdown came from Twitter. Hoft points to the FBI's role in the platform's adoption of hack-based material as a quote, and he claims that Twitter in December 2020 censored content about the Hunter Biden laptop story under such a policy, the Supreme Court opinion reads. Hoft's own declaration reveals Twitter acted accordingly to its rules against posting or sharing privately produced, distributed, intimate media of somebody without their express consent. And further twisting the knife, the decision notes, Hoft provides no evidence that Twitter adopted a policy against posting private, intimate content in response to the FBI's warnings about hack and leak operations.
Wow.
So they basically said, you can't do this. And specifically Jim Hoft and Gateway Pundit, you can't do this. And Alito didn't like this decision. And he quoted Jim Jordan's committee as evidence that this was really important. Which gives you an idea where Alito's head is at, which is basically where the sun don't shine. Because Jim Jordan's a known liar, and this is ridiculous. This is political.
It is rather amazing and an amazingly connected case because, and it's interesting that that the court says, no, you've actually provided evidence that Twitter did this, not the FBI. There was the whole effort. There was a huge push, a coordinated push on to show that it was Twitter that did the Twitter files. Elon Musk bought Twitter in order to prove that Twitter
Matt
did.
Taibbi doesn't come out looking good on this.
It's amazing. And so then they're like, actually, Twitter did do it, but it was okay for them to do it, but it definitely had nothing to do with the FBI.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the improvidently granted Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. We continue on with our, coverage of the Supreme Court
certainly
with
non-legal
garbage.
Analysis, I'm happy to tell you.
It is coverage of the Supreme Court. It's not Supreme Court coverage per se, but it depends. These things matter which order the words are in. As we learned from the first case, quid pro quo, no quid pro quo, no quid pro quo. Can't have that, but you can.
No
and
quo
you
without a quid.
Can't catch me for quid pro quo if
How
it
many
was
quid
a quo
did you pay
pro
me to
quid.
get this, bro?
Right, yeah, the British know what we're talking about here. But if you pay ahead, and that was essentially the outcome of it. Is, by the way, the metric of it is if I do you the favor first and then you give me money in appreciation for the favor, that's okay. That's a gratuity. Or it might be okay. Anyway, they're going to, believe it or not, they're leaving it to the states to figure out whether it's okay. They didn't clarify with
a footnote whether it covered RVs, but obviously it does.
Right. Whereas if I say, give me the RV, gas it up, and if you do, I'll do you the favor. That's a bribe. Can't have that. But you can have in other words, I guess Duke Cunningham's bribe menu. As long as it's a dessert menu, it's okay. If it is a menu of starters and entrees, that is illegal.
Yeah. So, this is like their decision with Bruin. When it comes down to the courts actually trying to deal with this functionally, good luck.
Well, I mean, if you have like at least 3 lunatics, it's going to be tough.
But that's the bribery case. As far as the social media content case,
yes, right.
I saved the best for last.
Oh.
And that is Amy Coney Barrett ruling in my favor.
Yours.
In this case. And let me quote her. Since the events of this suit, Twitter has merged into X Corp and is now known as X. Facebook is now known as Meta. Platforms, for the sake of clarity, we will refer to these platforms as Twitter and Facebook.
What? How dare she?
As they were known during the vast majority of the events underlying this suit. I always call it Facebook. I always call it Twitter.
Yeah,
and Amy Coney Barrett rules in my favor.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you on that. I do the same thing. I mean, X
just because Elon wants to call it X doesn't mean I have to.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess we should poll all the people who still, maybe all the people who still work there might be Elon fans. They get to, they should be able to call themselves whatever they want. But then again, I don't know. That it is confusing. It's stupid. X is a terrible name. Meta is, I just forgot completely. And if you say I did this on Meta or Meta did this or even X did that, people don't know what the hell you're talking about. They just don't.
Yeah. At the same time, I want to move on to the +1 case.
Oh, yes.
But before we can dig it, we have to talk a little bit about EMTALA.
EMTALA.
EMTALA. EMTALA stands for a federal law called the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act.
Oh.
Now, labor, I don't mean AFL-CIO. I mean like pregnancy, like you're delivering a baby kind of labor.
All right. Yes.
All right. EMTALA requires doctors to stabilize or treat any patient who shows up at an emergency room. But there's another piece to that because doctors know it as the anti-dumping law. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that a pregnant lady shows up at a small hospital that doesn't have an OBGYN.
Not even one.
No, and therefore they're not really qualified to deliver a baby.
You guys should get one.
What are they supposed to do?
All right.
The law says you have to stabilize or treat any patient who shows up, and if you don't have the facilities to do this, you have to arrange, the emergency room, have to arrange proper transport to an accepting facility. That means
Uber proper.
You have to take the trouble to call the other facility, explain the case, get them to accept the case. I used to do this all the time in my previous life.
Okay.
And once they accept the case,
reasonable.
Then you have to work out transport. Sometimes you do it. Sometimes they do it. In the case of children, for example, who were critically ill, it was often the case that I would call Yale or Connecticut Children's Medical Center and use their transport teams.
Because they have them.
Because they have them. They were skilled. They had helicopter transport, which could fly 2/3 of the time. Sometimes it would be by land if the weather wouldn't permit a helicopter flight. But that way you would get, for example, maybe an ICU fellow on the transport in addition to the flight nurses so that they could properly care for a kid, during transport. But that was my job, to contact them, get them to accept it, and then with them arrange the transport. In other words, you can't say, oh, we don't have the facility to take care of this.
We're closed.
We called a cab. They'll take you down the street to the hospital. That's dumping. That's why this is called the anti-dumping law.
I see.
You have to make the formal arrangements. And so EMTALA is part and parcel and key to how emergency departments and emergency rooms function.
All right.
You can't just wave it away and say, oh, well, we're going to change the rule. It's the law, and it got passed because of the for-profit hospitals saying, well, we don't take Medicaid patients. We're dumping you over to the public hospital.
Okay.
It's a really important law.
So when you say you can't be waved away, we must be looking at a case of someone waving someone away.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. You can't. I will. All right.
So
you're going to the Supreme Court.
The law requires emergency rooms to offer a medical exam if you turn up at their facility. The law applies to nearly all emergency rooms that accept Medicare funding, which is basically every emergency room.
Okay.
There aren't emergency rooms that don't accept Medicare funding, to my knowledge.
Those are
and
just
if there are, there's like 2 of them,
non-emergency
and you can count them on your thumbs.
Okay.
Assuming you have 2 thumbs. Those emergency rooms are required to stabilize patients if they do have a medical emergency before discharging or transferring them. And if the ER doesn't have the resources or staff to properly treat the patient, staff members are required to arrange a medical transport to another hospital, as I've explained.
Yes.
And then they have to confirm the facility can and will accept the patient.
Yeah,
so, for example,
a proper place.
If a pregnant woman shows up in an ED concerned that she is in labor but there's no OBGYN who could deliver, hospital staff can't simply direct the woman to go elsewhere.
Okay.
Right? So let's say you're in Boise, Idaho.
Oh, let's not say that.
And you show up in the emergency room and you're having an ectopic pregnancy and you need to,
I definitely don't want to have
deal
that.
with it. Okay?
Yeah, emergency.
The ER
emergency.
there can't say, well, Idaho law says we can't do anything. And furthermore, the nearest facilities, Portland, Oregon, or maybe Seattle, you can walk there. We'll give you slippers.
Oh, well, it was nice of them.
You can't do that. You have to arrange a transport. It's 8 hours. You have to arrange it, and you have to make it happen. And that may or may not work if, in fact, it's a true emergency and you actually have the staff to deal with it. So this is the issue that came up.
Okay.
And that's what was argued. The case was brought, and it was an interesting case in the following sense. Unlike the Supreme Court this term overturning the cuckoo Fifth Circuit time after time after time because they're nuts, I mean, the process would be the conservatives bring a case to Matt Kaczmarek, or they bring a case to somebody who they know is going to rule their way at the lower court, district court level. Then it moves up to the Fifth Circuit, and the Fifth Circuit agrees with the crazy, and then it gets to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has to deal with it. And the Supreme Court's been reversing the Fifth Circuit because they say in so many cases, you're like nuts.
Yes, the Fifth Berserkit, as you call it now.
Fine, okay. In this particular case, however, remember where Idaho is geographically.
West.
It's out there west.
Yes.
Okay. This would have been the Ninth Circuit. And instead of allowing the Ninth Circuit to deal with this, the Supreme Court took the case, skipped the Ninth Circuit, and said, we'll deal with this directly. That's important when it comes to the dig part.
Yeah, well, okay.
So, in other words, the Supreme Court set themselves up to take this case. And then they had the case argued. And then they were debating it.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't come to a final decision. But their publishing department mistakenly put up the draft final decision.
Yes.
Which basically said, you know what? The problem with this case is that it shouldn't have been here. And so we are going to discharge it improvidentially granted. We're going to dig this case.
That is...
and the other Supreme Court justices who were in the minority on this decision looked around and said, what are you doing this for? Alito said, this is ridiculous. We took the case. We should rule in favor of Idaho. And Ketanji Jackson said, this is ridiculous. We took the case and we should argue in terms of the federal government. This is a supremacy case. It's open and shut. The federal government has jurisdiction over the states when it comes to a conflict of law. What is wrong with you? And the thing that's wrong with them is that, the politicals on the Supreme Court, particularly, I think, Kavanaugh and especially Chief Justice Roberts, said, we got a problem here. Because Amy Coney Barrett may wind up voting with the liberals, and so they may win their case. Ketanji Jackson may be right, and so we may wind up losing this. Or the conservatives may wind up prevailing, and then we hand the Democrats an election issue right before the debate, and, we don't want any of that. So the best way to deal with this is to not deal with it. We're going to dig this case. And so they did.
Yeah, I guess
Except
so.
We don't know that they did because it isn't final.
That's true.
And as
apparently they only released those dig cases on the last day.
Yeah, Josh Blackman writes on the Volokh conspiracy. This is unusual for a lot of reasons. Firstly, you're not ever supposed to publish this. Secondly, the actual writing isn't in the typical format, so it's not really done, ready for publication. But most importantly, big decisions usually come in the very last day of the term.
Go. Yeah, so that's usually their announcement that they're finished.
Yeah, so this was basically
these do happen.
But it was a mistake at so many levels.
It's really, it's pretty incredible.
They never should have taken this case.
No. They have to allow themselves the flexibility to do this from time to time and say, I mean, it can't be the case that the court that has the last word on everything and no one can review them is suddenly disempowered from deciding, even after they've had arguments and everything, right. Oh my God, we should never have taken this.
You know, as a theoretical example, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here.
You're wrong.
But let's say the Supreme Court, which is really bloodthirsty and likes to kill people, gets a case where somebody is arguing that you shouldn't execute me even though I'm guilty of this crime because it's cruel and unusual punishment. And the Supreme Court rolls its eyes and says, we dealt with this like 50 times.
Yeah.
And then after the case is presented and heard, new exculpatory DNA material is presented showing this guy really is innocent.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The Supreme Court took the case. They heard the arguments. They ought to have the right to say, you know what? This is a dig.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. They could say that we shouldn't have. Well, I mean, I don't know if they would have, if that's how they would deal with it. But that's the kind of situation where there's a clear error that's happening, and there would be a huge miscarriage of justice if they went ahead with the opinion they were going to publish, and rather than publish, scramble to write a completely different new opinion and publish that one, they just say, if the court below had the question correct and our dismissal of it will leave the right thing being done, then we can do it. That's a short circuit. Good. We'll do that.
It's rare.
Yeah.
But it happens.
I guess so. I mean, they have an acronym for it, so it must happen.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I got a whole write-up on it.
Yeah, and this one is particularly
digging
interesting.
into digs.
Oh, okay.
You know, as explained by Ronald Mann, this is back in 2019. Supreme Court on Tuesday dismissed as improvidentially granted the case of Emulex versus Varjabedian.
Yeah, I would never have granted that one because I can't.
In this post, I spent a bit more time speculating about why they did this. But what happened is the Supreme Court granted cert, in this case, to decide the question whether the Ninth Circuit correctly held, in express disagreement with 5 other courts, that Section 14E of the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 supports inferred private right of action based on a negligent misstatement or omission made in connection with a tender offer. You got to be a lawyer to love this case.
But it was the Ninth Circuit again. That's interesting.
This carefully worded question from the cert petition encompasses 2 distinct issues: whether there's a private right of action to enforce Section 14E at all, and if so, whether negligence suffices to violate the provision.
Yeah, no. Okay. Totally different case.
The body of the cert
2019.
petition then urged the Supreme Court to grant review on the ground there is a split over the negligence standard. The respondents objected that not only had the petitioners failed to raise an objection to the private right of action before the Ninth Circuit, they had, according to the respondents, affirmatively said they didn't dispute it. Well, the Supreme Court granted cert anyway.
For reasons.
On the merits, the petitioners disaggregated their arguments more distinctly. In effect, what happened here is when they came to the Supreme Court, they then made a completely different argument than the one that they had presented to the Supreme Court to get themselves there. And at that point, the Supreme Court said, you know what, this is a dig.
Okay.
We're not doing this.
Yeah, that seems like a good use case there, too. Right? And you don't want to reward people for making, bogus arguments to get themselves up to the Supreme Court and then say, our real argument is something else. Well, then go back down and make that argument and see what the appeals court thinks of it.
Right. So in a few rare cases, the Supreme Court has digged cases in response to a perceived bait and switch. Okay. And there have been a handful of instances where it appears, and that's what I think happened here, that the Supreme Court digged a case simply because it was unable to reach a consensus and apparently believed that digging it would be better than issuing a fractured opinion with no controlling rationale.
Usually, anything is better than issuing that.
Yeah. So, if for politics, well, sure, for whatever reason.
Yeah, no one can stop them. But yeah, it's very interesting. And
So now we have a new term into our lexicon that we never knew we were going to need. And it all happened because of the Supreme Court. I just think it's fascinating.
It is. And also just fascinating observation from Justice Jackson. Does she go by Jackson or Brown Jackson for when you call her Justice something? Well, Brown. Yeah, I don't want I want to use your title, but I don't want to use it improperly. But Justice Jackson,
people call her.
Okay, very good. I don't want to leave out any important parts if she likes to have the brown in there, but okay. Justice Jackson makes a great point, which is essentially, the conservatives on the court, I guess, in voting to take this thing, although, and to take it out of the hands of the Ninth Circuit because they knew that the Ninth Circuit was going to say, wait a second, this is stupid. I know in your zeal to rid the country of abortion, you'll do just about anything, but this is a straight up case of we're out of a job if the federal law isn't, if there isn't a federal supremacy clause. There's not much left for us to do here. And this is an easy case on supremacy grounds. Why are you taking it out of the Ninth Circuit's hands and putting it in your hands? And then you realize, oh my God, you really stepped in it, because what ends up happening here is, once again, we're going to have to, in order to do this anti-abortion thing, there's going to have to be another decision that makes zero sense and throws a huge body of federal law out the window just to score an abortion win. And now that we've realized that abortion wins are in fact electoral losses, we don't want to do it. But you said you would take this case. So here it is.
We're not going to do it, and if Trump wins, we don't have to, because he'll pass a different law.
Right, I guess so. So they just said, well, maybe we'll just eject.
So we won't. It won't be on our hands.
Right. So
we will have clean hands.
She's quite right about that.
Chris Geidner noted something else here. He said, if the court digs the case,
and it does, man.
And man, it is so cool that they do. Such a decision would do nothing to the decision in the case out of Texas, affirmed by the U.S. Court of Appeals for, wait for it, the Fifth Circuit.
What circuit?
Holding that EMTALA doesn't protect abortion care.
Ugh.
Wednesday was indeed delay, and that's why Jackson said today's decision is not a victory for pregnant patients in Idaho, it's delay. She said, basically, they didn't adopt Idaho's far-fetched theories, is a quote, but the court hasn't rejected them either.
Yeah, but they should have, but now the Ninth Circuit will, and so that's something. But it'll take quite a while.
So now what you'll have is the Ninth Circuit on the one hand, and then the Fifth Circuit on the other, and that's a perfect split. Supreme Court case. That's what they're there for.
Right.
But the problem is that what happens in the meantime? Well, in the Idaho case, there's a stay on trying to enforce Idaho's law so that the ERs get to do whatever they want, which is good. And I haven't researched the Texas case. I don't know where that one stands.
Yeah, I don't know. But all right, well, then we'll have a different route, a more traditional route to the Supreme Court, a circuit split.
Right. Anyway, the name of this case is Moyle, M-O-Y-L-E. And for those who are listening, this is not a case where the ER has to decide whether a bris is a medical procedure. Right. That's not what's going on here.
Other kind of Moyle.
That's a different spelling. It's a different word. It's a different language.
Mohale. Okay. Yeah, right. Nothing to do with it. It's just a matrix
don't be
glitch.
Confused when you hear that the Supreme Court digs Moyles.
Completely different.
Completely different.
Weird, and just the whole situation is bizarre. And I know it's minutia, but that's the stuff that makes these court decisions interesting, and
it's what makes our shows interesting. We deal with minutia.
We think so. Yeah, and this is another tool at the disposal of the court, and no one can tell them they can't do anything. So this time they're not going to do it. It's also interesting that they made this mistake in publishing it, because it's actually very hard to get print material out of the Supreme Court. For this reason, they don't. Well, that and to try to prevent leaks. I mean, the clerks, at least years ago, the case was that the clerks' computers where these things are written they're simply not connected to the internet. It's not allowed to do that, or at least you can't work on the same computers that are internet connected to do your work, so that stuff doesn't leak or get inadvertently published. It's really kind of amazing. And if they had this protocol for digs being on the last day, the publications office knows this. I don't know why there was anything in a position to be disseminated. It shouldn't have even been on a computer that disseminates things if it hasn't been finalized. So I'm curious about it not even being in formal language. I mean, is this like, are they emojiing back to one of the LMFAO? This should be digged, that this isn't ready for publication. Well, put it on the publications computer and we'll just wait. Right. All you have to do is hit the button. Well, put it on there on Friday then.
So let's just throw in a couple of things that have nothing to do with the courts.
All right. Well, you think they don't. They'll be back.
They'll be back. They will eventually, but not yet. Uh-huh. Okay, this is a report from reporter Dan Schaefer writing in the recombobulation area, which I think he does on Substack. It looks like Substack. You can't always tell what's a Substack and what's not, because sometimes people go out of their way to hide it.
Because Nazis or something.
But anyway, yes. Special report, RNC bookings underwhelming and a failure. Event venues and restaurants raise concerns. The Riverside Theater and Pabst Theater, like in Pabst Blue Ribbon, will sit empty during the convention in Milwaukee, in that horrible city. And some downtown restaurant owners worry over lack of activity with RNC just weeks away.
All right. Yes, I did see that story, and I did see someone say, gee, I wonder if this has anything to do with Trump, who is to be nominated at this convention, in all of his speeching saying it's a horrible, horrible city. And of course, he's not even staying there. He's staying in Chicago where he owns a property. He told all his pals, the place is terrible and disgusting. And then nobody booked the hotel.
Gary Witt, president and CEO of the Pabst Theater Group, told the recombobulation area, try to say
this is really something,
that the majority of the group's venues will have no events booked for the RNC. And he said he talked to other people who do the same thing he did, and they're basically telling him the same thing. It's 100% a case, he said, of overpromise, underdeliver on all parts by everybody.
Well, all right. Very Trumpy.
Yeah. Witt said the Pabst Theater Group is in constant contact with everyone else in town that does what we do, and I'm hearing the same thing from them. So this is from July 15th to 18th. So we got a bunch of events coming up. This is one of them. Okay. Trump's sentencing is another. Next week is going to be the wipeout election in Great Britain for the Tories, who may finish third behind the Lib Dems, which would be really interesting. That's July 4th. Oh, yeah. And, of course, we have the debate today.
Yes. Why?
Well, that's a good question. Walter Shapiro, who's been watching presidential elections for decades.
Yeah, it's not his fault.
I once asked him how many. Didn't you do like 10 or something? He said, no, I've done more than that. But when you read that in my bio, I have to redo the bio. I've actually done more. Whatever it is, whatever number, I can't even remember. Whatever number I said he did more than that. So he's been watching this for a while. And so he writes, Joe Biden should be boring in Thursday's debate. Voters don't need zingers. They don't need put-downs. They just need to be reminded that an adult is in charge. And he makes the point that this is the earliest debate ever, and most of the public isn't paying attention.
Thank you. I wondered about that because, technically neither of them have been nominated yet. So it is a little early. I mean, we all know what's going to happen and all that. And it's okay with me for them to have an early debate.
That's okay, but in the end, Democrats should realize. Biden simply has to show that he doesn't drool. In the end, Democrats should realize if Biden wins the debate, if he comes across as competent, even if he's boring. This is not a debate that requires clever zingers, rehearsed put-downs. What the voters want is not a level that charisma, but the reassuring sense of caring adults in charge of government. That's all. That's Biden's job. Interestingly, when it comes to Trump's job, Jon Stewart, the editorial board, says, you got to ask the question, what's behind Trump's lie that Biden's on drugs? And the answer is, first of all, he's on drugs. And secondly, he's not really trying to win.
The debate or the election? Maybe both. I'm just curious. Okay.
The Republican leadership, including the Speaker of the House, is backing up the lie. Everybody wants to know, says Mike Johnson. Is he dealing with energy drinks? The popular theory is that he's on Mountain Dew because, is that
an energy drink?
Sugar causes a high and Mountain Dew is an energy drink. I mean, there's a whole bunch of conspiracy theories you can go down a rabbit hole on. I advise you not to. I'm just telling you.
Okay.
This is being interpreted, says Jon Stewart, as a convention, as a confession. that Republican elites
right.
are worried that on Thursday their nominee is going to get smoked. They should be worried. Trump's habitual incoherence has been obvious to those of us who have been paying attention, and it was abundantly clear to America's top CEOs. And it will become more obvious as millions of people who have not been paying attention will be checking in on politics for the first time since the last election. So the hope is by advancing the lie that Biden's on drugs, the GOP can raise the specter of cheating. That way Biden's aggression won't seem like an asset, and it will prove the allegation. Meanwhile, Trump won't seem so degraded. He'll seem like a victim. And while many seem apprehensive about Biden's age, partly due to media outlets like the Times having made a fetish out of it, the allegation he's on drugs or a whole gallon of energy drinks, as Mike Johnson put it, won't convince anybody who's not already convinced. So whatever swing voters think, they don't think Biden's a snowblower. That's convincing only in the upside-down, backwards, and prolapse world of right-wing politics. It's important to think about the intended audience for the lie. I mean, Don Jr. is a snowblower.
Okay.
He puts snow up his nose.
Yes. Well, so it would appear. Okay. I mean, I don't know how this is supposed to work.
I didn't use any
him.
Specific words. I'm just throwing out these terms, and you make it what you will.
All right.
He likes snow, right?
Yeah, I mean...
He's into winter sports.
Sure.
It tells us a lot about Trump. There's more going on than masking his cognitive decline. Lies like this tell us he can't win if he plays by the rules. Okay? That's like, I don't need any extra votes. I don't need Nikki Haley's vote, right? You only say that if you think that the way you're going to win the election is quite different than like counting up the number of votes and whoever got more wins.
Yeah.
So
don't do it that way. That's
in any
boring.
case, John Sturr says he's not really trying to win. He's just trying to cheat.
Okay.
Like he plays golf.
Yes, that's true. I guess my question about he's not trying to win, sometimes I'm not sure whether people mean he doesn't really and truly want to serve as president again, or
I
whether
think that this whole election is a scam to, first of all, try to raise enough money to pay his lawyers, and secondly, to try to stay out of jail.
Yeah, but I'm
or
wondering
vice versa. You can put the other one first if you wish, because it's true.
True, right? And I mean, I do understand that one, and that one makes sense to me. I guess it's a question of, I think in 2016, there's a different kind of he wasn't trying to win than he's trying to do now. He does want to have the power and intends to see if he can grab it, but it doesn't matter whether he gets the most votes in order for him to feel entitled to take it. All right. Wow. There was a lot packed into 1 hour for a Thursday. That means we'll see you on Monday. All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Now it becomes my show. And I've got some things to say. Oh, Chris Geidner, who, as always, is on hand at the Supreme Court, on the ground, when they hand out the papers that they also hand out electronically, but he likes to read things on paper, says it is, and this is the only way you'll get this information, if someone is there to tell you that it is, ready for this one? Do we have some sort of, dramatic music. Oh, but I forgot to tell you what the drama is. I should play that afterwards, but let's just say we did it back. This is the quo pro quid. My playing the dramatic music is an unacceptable bribe, whereas if I had played it afterwards, it would have been a gratuity and been okay. It is a 2-box day at SCOTUS, so that means that they'll be getting a maximum, they think, of 4 decisions. But we discussed that yesterday. Remember, there was some information from Steve Vladek talking about the number of boxes that they bring in. So it's 10 o'clock. The boxes are out. We'll start to see people giving us interpretations on the fly of what happened. And here we have only just barely begun to digest what happened yesterday. Is there anything else that I've got? Is there anything I have in this pocket that I could put in your pocket that would make it so that you understood better what was going on in America? I'm not really sure. Let's see, by the way. Can we get that Judd Legum piece to open up? Still not happening. I wonder if I just go to public notice and their front page, whether I can navigate my way there. No, they're having trouble getting to that site. So problems over at public notice, which is too bad. The issue that I was citing them for was the Attorney General of Missouri, who made it into the news in another of the cases that Greg was discussing. Andrew Bailey, basically the idea was, and again, we brought this up, and I think we might have snuck it in earlier at some other, on some other date, that Andrew Bailey, as Attorney General of Missouri, suing New York for having prosecuted Donald Trump, alleging that that is election interference, or at least saying that he was going to. And here, again, I'm not 100% sure because I'm looking at it in the pocket view, which sometimes misattributes things, but it says here Judd Legum is behind this piece. How right-wing media is legitimizing a nonsensical and non-existent lawsuit. Well, it could just be the case that he just hasn't filed yet. He said, I'm going to file. And in journalism world, when a sitting actual attorney general from a state says, I'm going to file a lawsuit, usually it's okay to go ahead and say, yeah, he's going to file that lawsuit. But when they're Trumpy people and they're involved in Trumpy things involving Trump directly, you got to question that. Always check the paperwork with these guys, right? And, that reminds me, there was something that was, one of the stories in the last day or two where I said, yeah, remember, you're always supposed to check the paperwork. And if you had actually done that, you would know. But now I can't remember which case that was. We'll see whether memories are triggered along the way here. But maybe Judd Legum writing this thing under this title, and starts off with an embedded tweet from Attorney General of Missouri, Andrew Bailey, breaking, I will be filing. So he says he hasn't done it yet. He admits. He admitted. My God, he have not filed suit. I will be filing suit against the state of New York for their direct attack on our democratic process through unconstitutional lawfare against President Trump. It's time to restore the rule of law. The rule of law wherein you don't have the Attorney General of Missouri intervening in New York law and saying that I understand it better than New Yorkers do, and you've made this mistake in interpreting your own statutes and Constitution, not to mention the federal Constitution. You might understand the federal Constitution better than New Yorkers do. It's even possible you might understand or have a better understand or present a better interpretation of New York law than New York lawyers do, but you also just don't have any jurisdiction there and probably don't have any standing to sue inside New York. But it's an interesting question whether or not the federal Supreme Court would grant you standing to sue New York for having applied its own law in ways that make you mad. Bailey's announcement or tweet announcing his intention to file a lawsuit, this article says, was covered last Friday by Sinclair's National Desk. This piece, authored by Jackson Walker, there's a link to it here, is short and shoddy. The only person quoted other than Bailey is conservative culture warrior Riley Gaines, a former collegiate swimmer. What? Okay, true. Who has no legal bona fides, and is best known for pushing transphobia during her regular Fox News appearances. There's no trans issue involved in this one. So I don't know. Did Fox News decide to convert Riley Gaines from trans issue complainer to legal commentator? Maybe. I don't know. Nevertheless, Walker's piece was pushed from the National Desk to the websites of dozens of Sinclair affiliates across the country, where it was given the imprimatur of mainstream media brands like NBC, ABC, and CBS. Then on Tuesday, 2 days ago, a misleading news brief about Bailey's threatened lawsuit was included in the National Desk's syndicated morning show, where it was broadcast in more than 70 local markets all across the country. Missouri suing New York over its prosecution against former President Trump. Anchor Jan Jeffcoat began before falsely claiming that Bailey's lawsuit is going, quote, straight to the Supreme Court. Well, there's nothing to establish that, yet it hasn't even been filed. Jeffcoat did not mention that the lawsuit has not yet been filed or that the Supreme Court is under no obligation to hear the case. Two good points. The Bailey formula for MAGA stardom is discussed next. Even though he's still never won an election, Bailey is a rising MAGA star. How does he get to be Missouri Attorney General? I don't know. I guess maybe they appoint their attorneys general there or what have you, but never won an election, eh? Since being appointed, there's the answer, to office in January of last year, Bailey has become a fixture on right-wing TV. I haven't seen him because I don't watch right-wing TV. And he has proven to be especially skilled at using, well, it says here X, but as we know, Amy Coney Barrett will tell you, Justice Barrett says it's Twitter, has been especially skilled at using it to advance his brand of reactionary politics. Late last year, Bailey announced on Twitter, I'm going to make the switch here too, his intention to sue Media Matters after Media Matters reported that Twitter was displaying ads for prominent brands next to neo-Nazi content. How is he going to sue? I don't know. But he filed the suit at the urging of Elon Musk, of course, and Trump advisor Stephen Miller. So, okay. Did he actually file it? Maybe he did file that one. Does it have a leg to stand on? I don't know what it would be. This year, based on a deceptive Project Veritas video. What? No way. Bailey again announced on Twitter his plan to file a lawsuit against Planned Parenthood that he said was aimed at driving the nonprofit out of Missouri. In both instances, Bailey's lawsuits ended up being remarkably flimsy, but the merits are beside the point. Bailey's tweets spread like wildfire within MAGA circles on social media and then became big topics of conversation on Fox News, Newsmax, and other right-wing outlets. These legal stunts shaped news cycles and raised Bailey's profile as a national MAGA leader. I gotcha. All right. That's actually the entirety of the article. But yeah, I guess raising our awareness of the fact that Andrew Bailey may or may not, be a lawyer. I don't know. He was appointed as Missouri Attorney General. He is a culture warrior. He files suits left and right to further culture war issues, but not necessarily to further them legally, but rather to enable the right-wing media circus to report that a lawsuit has been filed by an important sounding personage. This person has been appointed to the job of Attorney General in Missouri, and that's an actual state, so we have to pay attention to it. And basically, it just pulls the old Newt Gingrich trick of elevating a story to the point where you can report it in the right-wing media and then go to mainstream media and say, how come you're not covering this important story? An actual attorney general from an actual state is filing a case that's totally bound for the Supreme Court based on nothing. I just say so. It could end up at the Supreme Court. Anything could end up at the Supreme Court. They could take cases at the Supreme Court and then decide it was stupid for us to take it. Never mind. We're going to dig it right the hell out of here. So who knows? Anyway, that's an important point to watch. Because to the extent that you see stories like I did, hey, the Attorney General of Missouri is suing New York over this stupid theory, and I go ahead and report it, and then we're reminded, he says he's going to sue, but he hasn't sued yet. I don't know whether it necessarily, it's a weird thing. There's actual reason to wait and say, no, don't report this story until it's actually filed. And by the way, the story would be much better if you had the legal reasoning behind the suit available, which you'll only get once things are filed. Unless, of course, he has a very thorough, I guess if you had a really thorough briefing and convinced you, yes, he's a wackadoodle, but he understands the mechanics of how you would file and prosecute such a suit. But, apparently he doesn't. So anyway, it's worth pointing out. Yeah, always check the paperwork. When they say they're going to file suit, you need to, 1, make sure that they actually do, and 2, it's important that they be able to put together a coherent case. You should be able to see the filings and judge them on that basis. And with a gang like this, it's worth keeping in mind that a lot of this is just publicity stunts, and if you give them the publicity they want, you are playing into their hands. It's not too much to ask that you wait and see whether they really do follow through and file that lawsuit. Okay, back in Supreme Court land, Greg has been keeping an eye on what's happening at 10 o'clock, looking at what's in the two boxes. Here's the word he takes from Mark Joseph Stern, who writes on Twitter that the Supreme Court's first decision is Ohio versus EPA by a 5-4 vote. The majority blocks the EPA's good neighbor rule, because you don't want to have any of those. I wonder where Alito landed on the good neighbor rule. They block the EPA's good neighbor rule restricting upwind states' ozone emissions. Barrett, along with the liberals, in dissent. It's starting to look like she might actually have some conscience. It's interesting. Greg was floating the idea that she might have voted with the liberals. Here she has. But she might have voted with the liberals on a case that at least tangentially touches on abortion, the one that they digged out and decided not to issue a decision, and because she may have been kind of cornered. Yeah, look, I hate abortion as much as the next of the 5 lunatics that serve with me here on the Supreme Court. But the supremacy clause is actually super important and critical, and it basically mandates overruling what they thought they were going to get out of the Fifth Circuit later on. And that's part of the thing, part of the issue too, right? They took it out of the hands of the Ninth Circuit. They have a district court that says essentially, yeah, this federal law that says emergency rooms actually have to treat people medically and make sure that they don't die and do no harm. That, screw that whole thing. We want to get rid of that. Even though federal law insists on it, we're going to read the federal law to not insist on it and say, to hell with it. Even the Ninth Circuit would have said, you can't do that. That's crazy. The federal statute wins out in this. The end. They took it out of their hands, I guess, with designs on saying the Ninth Circuit would have done something sensible on this. We want to take it for the opportunity to do something nonsensical with it. And then found out, oh, actually, that's bad for Republicans and will make us look stupid. We will have to rule against the supremacy of federal law in order to do that. We might want to do that later to help the Fifth Circuit with their version of the same case. But if we take this case now, we either have to be completely ignorant of the law and be proud to do it and let the Democrats run against that in the next election, or what? Something else. Or we have to say, no, as much as we hate abortion and want to get rid of it, we do believe in principles of law that have underlaid everything that all courts have done up until this point. We're not going to stand the supremacy clause on its head. We just can't. It's too embarrassing. So the facts of the case demanded it. So they said, get rid of the case. That's what they did. And now that was essentially Amy Coney Barrett's secret message, I guess, to everybody that, I mean, when it's really a super clear case like this one, I mean, obviously, you're just going to have to give up on the abortion fight for today and wait for a better case to come along. I'm with the liberals on that. There's a real thing. Law is something I studied very hard in law school to figure out. And I'm not just going to throw the whole thing out. Some of the rest of you didn't study so hard, so maybe it's not such a big deal for you to throw things out. But for me, I took it seriously, and I still do. So here she is with the liberals again. Let's see. I think this is still Mark Joseph Stern, a separate tweet here, perhaps. But this case, Greg sends me the comment, this case was about whether the Supreme Court should temporarily block a rule issued by the EPA to reduce air pollution. You know how that is. It's one of the chief things that EPA does. Trump and conservatives hate rules that block air pollution for whatever reason. I think it's because Trump still mentally lives in the 1980s and I guess must have thought acid rain and dying bald eagles were cool, and he wants to bring that back. That's the only explanation for it. I mean, if you're against bringing back strong and vigorous bald eagle populations, you're not an American. You don't belong in the White House for sure. And, but whatever, political union to own the globalists, I guess. Anyway, the case is about whether or not the Supreme Court should temporarily block a rule issued by the EPA to reduce air pollution from power plants and other industrial facilities while litigation is moving through the courts. Is it a better idea to let everybody die from air pollution while you're trying to settle whether or not they have the right to stop that air pollution? Or should you let them survive to see what the results of their case is? The Supreme Court grants the state's application to put the rule on hold, not the rule that things should be put on hold while you litigate, but rather the rule that it's okay to use the rules to put a hold on things while you're litigating. No holds for you, holds for us. We get to stop you, a hold against your rule that allows holds. How do you like that? Supreme Court grants states applications to put the rule on hold while the case proceeds in the lower court. Okay. Oh, the last bit is Katie Fang reporting. Thank you. Let's see. What else have we got here? Are we back to Mark Joseph Stern here now? The Supreme Court's second decision is the Purdue Pharma case. It takes a tough pharma company to make tender pharmaceuticals, I guess. Purdue Pharma, by an ideologically scrambled 5-4 vote. The majority holds that the bankruptcy code does not allow Purdue to enter a settlement that extinguishes other existing and potential claims against it. The Purdue Pharma majority, we'll have to untangle this one another day, is Gorsuch, joined by Thomas, Alito, Barrett, and Jackson. Kavanaugh dissents, joined by Roberts, Sotomayor, and Kagan. That is kind of scrambled. So in a sense, Jackson's departure from her fellow liberals decided this case. Okay. That probably warrants further examination, but we'll have to wait a day, and perhaps Friday can be about sharing some of those analyses. For right now, everybody else is reading through the rest of the two boxes to try to figure out what's going on. All right. While we are in court, let me just update you on a couple other court happenings before moving on to other subjects for the day here. Let's see. Got to open this up in a way that'll allow us to get back to Pocket quickly. This from Bloomberg News, and we have to get back to Pocket quickly because we might have to read it in Pocket. But although I have the Yahoo version of this, so maybe that'll allow us to read it. So here's a name we haven't heard in a while: Felix Sater. Remember Felix Sater, one of the weirdo Trump associates who also maybe was a little bit of a violent gangster, but was in this case and in his dealings with Trump doing the business suit, I'm a investor kind of guy, and I do legitimate business on Wall Street. Every once in a while, I take off the suit and put on a tracksuit and go and break legs so that people will invest with me, whatever. And he was with the Bayrock Group, right? Which is not actually from the Flintstones, but is a real entity that helped build and then put the Trump brand on, slap the brand on at the last minute in the Trump Soho building, right? The combination hotel and condo situation there. Anyway, and I think he was the guy who, despite, again, wearing a suit and having business cards and all of that stuff, also had in his background, like, was it smashing a wine glass and then stabbing somebody in a bar with it? You know, an interesting combination. Has got a foot in both worlds, we might say. There's more yet coming out about from the Supreme Court. A third but not last decision, will be interrupted again, is SEC versus Jarkesy. Is that right? Jarkesy. 6-3. Court holds that when the SEC seeks civil penalties, the defendant is entitled to a jury trial in federal court. Sounds technical, but it is said to be huge. SCOTUS decision in Jarkesy, according to, are we on Mark Joseph Stern here, may well hobble many federal agencies' abilities to bring meaningful enforcement actions against wrongdoers, not just the SEC. Neither the executive branch nor the judiciary have the time or resources to try all these cases before a jury. Nowhere close. So is this shutting down administrative law judges' abilities to hand out these punishments? I don't know. Congress would have to give a bunch of federal agencies vastly more money and personnel to handle all the jury trials that they would need to conduct to patch the hole that the SCOTUS just blew in their enforcement powers. It won't happen. This case will just let lawbreakers off the hook. Perfect for an incoming Trump administration, whether it wins a majority of the votes or not. Okay. So that sounds bad too. Too bad it didn't let this lawbreaker off the hook. Maybe he'll be able to get out on appeal. Ex-Trump associate Felix Sater loses money laundering trial, says Eric Larson at Bloomberg, which we're able to read because it's here in Yahoo. Another procedural hiccup here. Felix Sater, the Moscow-born dealmaker who was once part of Donald Trump's inner circle, but he's gone now, lost a civil trial in which he was accused of helping a wealthy Kazakh man launder millions of dollars through U.S. real estate, including condos at the Trump Soho Tower. Well, duh. All right, let's see what we got here. A federal jury in Manhattan issued a verdict Wednesday in favor of the city, not the city of Manhattan, not the city of New York, but rather the city of Almaty, Kazakhstan, and one of the country's biggest lenders, BTA Bank, awarding more than $32 million in damages, including interest, according to the lawyer for the plaintiffs, Matthew Schwartz of Boies Schiller Flexner LLP. Is that David Boies' firm? I guess so. I don't know how many of them are running around out there. We could look it up. Armando knows. We'll ask him. And okay, we don't have to call just yet, Armando. Take your time. Okay. And, we don't actually need to get an answer on that one. But I wouldn't be surprised, by the way, if Armando was steaming over the last couple of days of decisions out of the Supreme Court and wanted to chime in at some point. Anyway, the loss in court is a setback for Sater, and usually is. A controversial real estate operative who once had offices in Trump Tower, the Mos Eisley of Earth, as you know. I reject the verdict and will be appealing. Well, you're not very appealing. Sater said in a telephone interview, the verdict has yet to be posted on the court docket, so what's he going to appeal? We don't know. Check the paperwork. We are privileged to have been able to present this evidence to a U.S. jury and are thrilled with the verdict in favor of our clients, including the jury's imposition of punitive damages for the deliberate and particularly morally culpable conduct of Felix Sater, said Schwartz, Boies Schiller's chairman-elect and managing partner. Almaty and BTA, BTA is the bank, Almaty is the city in Kazakhstan, claimed that Sater helped Ilyas Krapunov, if I have that name correct, launder a portion of the roughly $6 billion allegedly looted from the bank by his father-in-law, former BTA chairman, that's just embezzlement, Mukhtar, Ablyazov, you tell me. Anybody fluent in Kazakh surnames? Well, he did this apparently in the years before the financial crisis, which, I guess was always. If your chairman is embezzling $6 billion from the bank, you're always in financial crisis. But I guess it would exacerbate one. Well, I did this, though, true, but I did it before the financial crisis. Do you think your financial crisis had anything to do with having $6 billion stolen? Maybe. So maybe it's not really before the financial crisis. Not theirs, anyway. The case is part of a global effort by BTA to recover the money, which was allegedly siphoned from the bank through a web of shell companies and bogus loans. Sounds Trumpy. Almaty alleges some of the laundered money was stolen from the city by Krapunov's father when he was mayor, though through corrupt sales of municipal land. So just to straighten this out, this is a hell of a guy. You definitely want to be hanging out with Ilyas Krapunov. I wouldn't. He sounds dangerous. Me, I don't want anything to do with it. Felix Sater, yes, please come to dinner. Let's hang out. Because Ilyas Krapunov, again, his father-in-law, Mukhtar Ablyazov, former chairman of BTA, helped steal $6 billion from the bank. Ilyas and Sater got together to launder that money. But again, keep your eyes on Ilyas Krapunov. His father-in-law stole all the money from the bank while he was the chairman, but his father, not father-in-law, but father, was mayor of Almaty, and through corrupt sales of municipal land, I guess, helped BTA put together packages of money to steal and launder with Felix Sater's help. What a gang. This is a very interesting crew, to say the least. Sater, who as late as 2011 was handing out business cards identifying himself as a senior advisor to Donald Trump, denied the allegations, but he testified that he lied when he helped Krapunov conceal his role in lucrative deals to dodge a worldwide freezing order that tied up his family's assets. Sater allegedly made millions in the process, and I'm sure Donald Trump got none of it. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Word is that the fourth and final case that, or at least issued for the day, I don't think this is meant to indicate final case for disposition for the term, because there's while they might in fact just hold on to the Donald Trump immunity case forever and issue no ruling whatsoever, or maybe dig it at the end, who knows. Why not just dig the rest of the stuff and go on vacation? It's all paid for, right? So go ahead. But I guess this is the last work for the day. They basically, it looks like they took the supposedly accidentally released dig of the Moyle case and just said, all right, it is a dig. I mean, this is it. We're going to make no corrections from what was done yesterday. There was speculation that Greg sent along, Mark Joseph Stern, saying maybe, I had thought that maybe Alito would think twice about strongly implying that Amy Coney Barrett found the emergency abortion question too emotional to decide. That it was thought that that was maybe just draft language that he would want to think better of and get rid of. But nope, it's still there. And maybe it's just, well, look, it's out there now. It's leaked. I might as well stand by it and go ahead and do it. So we'll just go ahead and publish it. And I guess to hell with the rules that, or not rule, but the practice that digs will only be issued on the last day. I guess they can just throw that out and say this is a one-time anomaly and just leave it as is. So there we go. The whole thing is out now in official format and everything, and available for review. I'm sure there'll be some commentary on that forthcoming as well. For now, for us, we'll continue with the Felix Sater case because, it's in the news. Not that it's a top headline. It's just something probably people won't be focusing on today, so we'll take care of it. Thanks to Bloomberg News, who actually did take care of it. So where were we? Well, right, we were revealing just how weird and wild the network of corruption was here. Ilyas Krapunov, it's Khra, Punov, Krapunov. We don't know whether it's Krapunov or Krapunov, or how do they say it in Kazakhstan, who's got a crooked father-in-law who was the chairman of the bank, and a crooked father who was mayor of Almaty, Kazakhstan, and together they all worked to fraudulently or improperly sell municipal land, and then some portion of that money was banked at BTA and then stolen from them and then laundered through Felix Sater and maybe Trump Soho as well. Didn't we see mention of that at some point? I just want to make sure that, did we see that? Here we are. Right. He was accused, Sater in this case is accused of helping a wealthy Kazakh man, we're talking about Krapunov, launder millions of dollars through U.S. real estate, including condos at Trump Soho Tower. It's kind of amazing. But it was a worldwide beacon for money laundering. Oh, wow. I can't believe that was the case. So, Sater, who as late as 2011 was handing out business cards identifying himself as a senior advisor to Donald Trump, denies the whole thing, and then says he testified that he lied when he helped Krapunov conceal his role in lucrative deals to dodge a worldwide freeze on his family's assets. Sater made millions in so doing. I wasn't legally obliged to tell the seller, the buyer of anything, to tell anyone of dirty laundry of a deal I was working on. Sater testified on June 18th during a nearly 3-week trial. They had a due diligence department. If they found it, they found it. If they didn't find it, they didn't find it. Now, that's not really the way it works. But they're obliged to try to find things, but you're not, under no obligation to reveal when you have a corrupt connection. You're not supposed to be doing the deal, period. But okay, I think you have some affirmative disclosure obligations. But let's read on. The investments at the center of the case included several units at Trump Soho and an Ohio mall. Scott, is this the mall where you guys hang out? I don't know. And private equity deals. I guess there's only one mall in Ohio, right? Okay, so what about this part where he's a Trump advisor? Well, Trump, who is 78 years old, they helpfully mentioned, isn't a defendant and isn't accused of wrongdoing in the case. But I bet you could put a case against him together. But the trial put fresh attention on Trump's dealings as he campaigns to return to the White House, sort of, including his ties with Russia before the 2016 election. That's what Sater's all about. Sater, who advised Trump on real estate investments and at one point led his failed effort to build a Moscow skyscraper, was one of many witnesses interviewed in special counsel Robert Mueller's probe into Trump's 2016 campaign. Sater met Krapunov in Trump Tower to discuss laundering the allegedly stolen money and personally arranged meetings between the wealthy Kazakh and Trump to discuss possible investments, BTA and Almaty said in the complaint. But the bank and the city went to great lengths in court documents to distance Trump from the allegations. They didn't really need that complication. They wanted to focus on Sater, and making it a Trump trial probably diminished their the chances of recovering something quickly. Had they involved Trump as a defendant, you never know when that trial date would have come along, if ever. There is no suggestion that either Ilyas or Sater disclosed to Mr. Trump the illicit origin of the stolen funds, or that Mr. Trump engaged in any impropriety whatsoever in connection with Ilyas Krapunov, according to the lawsuit. Again, it's not in their interest at this point to press that connection, even if they think it exists. Now, some more information about the things we were talking about earlier. Sater, who worked at Bear Stearns and other Wall Street firms in the 80s, served time in prison for stabbing a rival commodities broker in the face with a broken, margarita glass in a bar fight in Midtown Manhattan in 1991, which led to lasting nerve damage for the victim. I mean, that's good information and all, but, you don't really have to provide it. He stabbed the guy in the face. Let's say there was no nerve damage. Very lucky. But you still stabbed him in the face. So we're just going to have to hold that one against you. He later pleaded guilty to racketeering, completely different, for taking part in stock swindles that defrauded investors of more than $40 million. To stay out of prison, can you believe he stayed out of prison? Stabbed the guy in the face, stole $40 million, is out of prison. And by the way, here we are talking, as we were, about other Supreme Court rulings saying, you're going to have to, the SEC couldn't do an enforcement against this licensed securities broker who's stabbing other brokers in the face because you have to have a jury trial for, which you should really be having for stabbing somebody in the face anyway. But, okay. The point is, lots of people are going to stay out of jail for lots of things that are also bad. But if you think that's bad, what about this guy who stabs other brokers in the face and steals $40 million and still prison? I don't know. I don't think so. How did he stay out of prison? Sater worked as an informant for U.S. prosecutors investigating the mob's role on Wall Street. Well, he was the mob's role on Wall Street. BTA says Sater turned to real estate after he was banned from selling securities in 1999. He should be banned from selling just about anything. And come on, what's the difference? Wednesday's verdict is the latest legal twist for one of the more colorful people in Trump's orbit, although Trump is more colorful than most. BuzzFeed News in 2018 reported that Sater spent more than 2 decades as an intelligence asset for the U.S. government. Krapunov has denied wrongdoing. He previously said that he managed his own family's investments legally and denied that his Swiss company, as most Kazakhs have got, was a front for his father-in-law or that he had laundered any ill-gotten gains. Ablyazov, that's the father-in-law, has also consistently denied wrongdoing. The case is City of Almaty versus Sater in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York. How do you like that? SDNY, the Sovereign District of New York, handling the cases with aplomb on behalf of the Kazakh population. Well, we'll see whether they recover anything. Just wanted to remind you that Felix Sater exists, is a pretty hardcore criminal and a close associate of Donald Trump, even though Almaty, who's looking to, the city that's looking to recover this money, knows very well that they're not going to get anywhere if they include Donald Trump as a defendant and all of that, even if they have a case against him. All right, let's see. Other things that I wanted to share with you. Oh, yes, right. The procedural trick that Mike Johnson was interested in trying to pull. Let's go read that one, written up over at the New Republic. Take your time loading it. Go ahead. Edith Olmsted. Edith is the author of this piece under the headline, Desperate Mike Johnson leads wild moves to save Steve Bannon. Do we think they have a chance in hell? Ordinarily, no, but Supreme Court? All right. Anyway, the House Speaker and his Republican colleagues are attempting to overturn Bannon's jail sentence. How can they do this, right? He's been convicted. What's their plan? Here's the deal. House Speaker Mike Johnson and other Republican leaders held a secret vote late Tuesday night. A secret vote. Well, you can't really have secret votes of the House, though you can have a secret vote among the Republican conference. It must be that which they did, or whether it was the entirety of the Republican conference, I don't know, or maybe some steering committee or what have you, but not an official act yet, but might suffice to act as one in the short term. Let's read about it. Secret vote late Tuesday night in a last-ditch effort to save Steve Bannon from having to report to jail. Remember, that's set for, he has until July 1st to report. July 1st is Monday. So there will be probably no calls from Greg Dworkin in between now and the day Steve Bannon is supposed to report for his prison term. It's very close. High-ranking members of the House GOP voted to reject the previous Congress's formal position on the January 6th committee, according to Politico. And maybe Politico's write-up has some additional detail in it. But by the way, I'm trying to remember the current Congress. What number are we on here at the moment? Are we in the 118th Congress? Yes. And the 117th Congress, of course, was the one that that constituted the January 6th committee. So, for a willing set of courts, there's a dodge here and say, no. The 117th Congress was the one in which, for which Steve Bannon evidenced his contempt and then was in fact convicted for it. The 118th Congress can adopt all the interesting positions it wants. It might want to issue some sort of press release advising everybody that they would not have held Steve Bannon in contempt, but it's not up to them what the 117th Congress did or has to say for itself. That can't be changed. But here's the New Republic write-up of it. High-ranking members of the House GOP voted to reject the previous Congress's formal position on the January 6th committee, according to Politico. The House had found Bannon in contempt after he failed to comply with the congressional subpoena from that committee, leading to his subsequent indictment, conviction, and sentencing to 4 months in prison. Right, and now he's supposed to begin that prison term on Monday. By changing the House's formal position on the committee, lawmakers can now file a legal brief on behalf of Congress, though it's unclear whether this brief would go to the appellate court or straight to the Supreme Court, which is currently weighing Bannon's appeal. Remember, he did do a last-minute appeal to the Supreme Court on this. By undermining the committee's legitimacy, Republicans are trying to keep the MAGA mastermind from serving out his jail sentence, which is set to begin July 1st. Yeah, we're working on filing an amicus brief in his appellate work there. In his case, Johnson said Tuesday night on Fox News. Because the January 6th committee was, we think, wrongly constituted. You remember the controversies around empaneling the January 6th committee? The Democrats named their slate of people they wanted to serve on the committee and gave the Republicans the opportunity to name their slate, but they named basically a slate full of jokers who were just going to go and undermine the work on the committee. And then Speaker Pelosi rejected the Republican slate, essentially, and instead said, well, we'll put some Republicans on the committee, but they're going to be Republicans who are actually dedicated to doing the work and allowing the work to happen, and we'll take these members instead and put them on. And I guess, the Republicans were in the minority at the time, and there wasn't very much that they could do about it, and they couldn't speak for the Congress. They can speak for the Congress now, but the 118th Congress, and say, we reject the way the 117th did business. But, too bad. That's over with. They held the vote, and you lost it. You can hold another vote this time. You can certainly address statutory issues and repeal previously adopted laws, but it doesn't mean you can undo the proceedings of the previous Congress. They're kind of sealed. They may be sealed in amber. Anyway, you can always file an amicus brief, but you can't move the court to dismiss the case that's already been adjudicated. Well, anyway, he goes on to say, we disagree with House Speaker Pelosi put all that, the committee itself, together. We think it violated House rules. And so we'll be expressing that to the court. And I think it will help Steve Bannon in his appeal, Johnson added. I don't know whether he really believes that or is just saying that for the sake of supporting Steve Bannon and therefore Trump. But, they can express to the court that they think it violated House rules. But ordinarily, the Supreme Court would be most likely to say the final arbiter of whether or not House rules have been followed is the House. They asked the question in the 117th Congress, will the House permit this under its rules? And the answer was yes. It is not interesting to us whether the 118th Congress thinks the rules of the 117th Congress were misinterpreted. You can interpret things going forward, but to interpret things going backward and have it matter to us is a two-step that we're not going to allow. I mean, at that point, you could, for instance, what if they said, hey, the 118th Congress, the Senate part of the 118th Congress, thinks that the rules of the whatever Congress it might have been, that in which the Senate approved the nomination to the Supreme Court of Sam Alito, Clarence Thomas, you name it, we think they violated the rules. I'm not certain how. I could maybe make something up. I mean, here at least we have a claim as to why they think it violated the rules, but it didn't, because the arbiter of the rules is the House. Here, the arbiter of the rules could be the Senate, but they could say, in the 105th Congress or whatever Congress it was that dealt maybe with Alito's appointment, I have no idea which one it was. Somehow it was wrong. So he's not actually on the Supreme Court. And all the rulings that he participated in and all the rulings that Clarence Thomas participated in are null and void, or at least their opinions and votes in them are, because they weren't actually members of the Supreme Court. And all those laws and all those decisions and all those precedents are now overturned, stood on their head. Would that be okay with you? Probably not. Probably not. And probably for the same reason, not really available here. You can file an amicus brief. I hear you. You don't like the way the things went down in the 117th Congress. You are an important player in the constitutional system. You are the 118th Congress for God's sake. Everyone loves you, but you can't undo what the 117th Congress did just because you're angry about it. There are certain things you can do. You can repeal statutes, but you can't undo resolutions that don't have the force of law. That's just not something you're able to do. You can pass superseding resolutions, but they're of no value. The Department of Justice is expected to make a similar filing, by the way, on yesterday, urging the exact opposite of what Johnson's urging. The Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts is expected to rule on Bannon's appeal as soon as Wednesday afternoon. I don't believe I have seen anything about that. And it's possible that this new position will help Bannon overcome the precedent set by former White House National Trade Council Director Peter Navarro, who tried a similar gambit with his appeal. He said that the committee was unconstitutionally established, or not unconstitutional. Oh, maybe he did make a constitutional claim too, but certainly that it was in violation of the rules, but that it was somehow illegitimate in its very nature. And no, he lost that many times over. He tried a similar gambit with his appeal, which Roberts dismissed without even referring it to the full court. Of course, it's unclear whether Republicans' attempts to hand Bannon a get-out-of-jail-free card will make any difference at all. The January 6th committee's subpoenas were found to be valid by several federal judges. So there is that. Let's see what Politico had to say about it. GOP leaders back Steve Bannon's fight against conviction for defying January 6th panel. The Republican leaders voted to make their determination the formal position of the House. They would like to. Have they actually done that so far? That I don't know. Does it require a resolution on the House floor? It might not. They might be able to direct the House counsel to file this amicus brief without ever putting it to a vote of any kind on the House floor. That's possible, although I would imagine that would make it even less convincing to the Supreme Court. Betsy Woodruff Swan, Olivia Beavers, Jordan Carney, and Kyle Cheney all teamed up on this piece yesterday. It's been from Tuesday. It was updated yesterday. Let's see what they got. Speaker Mike Johnson and other House GOP leaders voted Tuesday to reject the previous Congress's handling of the January 6th committee. We heard about that. Republican leaders voted to make their determination the formal position of the House, if that matters, allowing them to file a legal brief on behalf of the chamber, according to 3 people familiar with a party line secret vote that was first reported in Politico. But again, they make it sound like if it was party line, did it involve Democrats at all? And it was simply that they won. In order for that to be a secret vote seems unusual, to say the least, if that's even possible. They were granted anonymity, of course, to discuss that vote of the House's bipartisan leadership. Oh, I see. Okay. Bipartisan leadership group that sets its formal legal position. So not a floor vote, but it does involve members from both parties. It's sort of like a gang of 8 that they hold for briefing all of Congress, House and Senate together on intelligence issues. This a House bipartisan leadership group that decides whether or not they will be directing the House counsel to take a certain legal position or file an amicus brief. The move comes as the Supreme Court nears a decision on whether to allow Bannon to go to jail on July 1st or remain free while he appeals his conviction. The Justice Department is due to file a brief with the High Court Wednesday, urging Bannon's immediate jailing. Chief Justice John Roberts may decide the matter as soon as Wednesday afternoon or may refer it to the full court for further consideration. We'll see what happens. Johnson, Majority Leader Steve Scalise, and Majority Whip Tom Emmer confirmed the closed-door vote in a statement Wednesday morning. The House brief will be filed with the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, which is considering Bannon's larger fight to overturn his conviction. It will withdraw certain arguments made by the House earlier in the litigation about the organization of the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack during the prior Congress. 3 GOP leaders said in a statement. It also remains to be seen what legal effect the position of the House GOP leaders will have on Bannon's fight. Several federal judges, including the Trump-appointed jurist who oversaw Bannon's trial, found that the January 6th committee's subpoenas were valid. The House voted to hold Bannon in contempt of Congress in October of 2021 after he refused to appear for a deposition or turn over subpoenaed documents. The Justice Department indicted him weeks later, and a jury convicted him in July of 2022. And he's been decaying ever since. Republicans have focused their criticism on the January 6th committee on 2 purported defects: its lack of a GOP-approved ranking minority member, and then Speaker Nancy Pelosi's decision not to fill several vacancies on the panel after then GOP leader Kevin McCarthy boycotted the panel because Pelosi refused to seat 2 of his initial picks. The committee faced numerous challenges along these lines in court battles against resistant witnesses, arguing in court that the House has never explicitly defined ranking member, which allowed the committee to elevate then Representative Liz Cheney, an anti-Trump Republican, to the role. And they also argued that vacancies cannot derail the operation of a valid committee, even if it was initially required to operate with a larger number of members. Several federal judges who ruled on the matter uniformly decided with the committee. The House GOP leader's decision came via a vote of the so-called Bipartisan Legal Advisory Group, a BLAG, if you like, a 5-member panel of the House Republican and Democratic leaders tasked with setting the chamber's positions in court. This group consists of Johnson, Scalise, Emmer, and Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries and Minority Whip Catherine Clark. It formally directs the House General Counsel on legal issues that are key to Congress as an institution. Its Democratic members voted against backing Bannon's position. Georgia Representative Barry Loudermilk, as chair of a House Administration Committee's Subcommittee on Oversight, also plans to file an amicus brief on Wednesday morning with the Supreme Court supporting Bannon and arguing that the January 6th Select Committee did not have the authority to conduct depositions under the House resolution that authorized it, according to a Republican aide granted anonymity to spew this stupid BS. Loudermilk's brief will cite the requirement for consultation with the minority-appointed ranking member before holding a deposition and argue that this requirement was not met. This is, of course, old hat, and Navarro got nowhere with it. It'll focus solely on the deposition issue and will remain silent on the lawfulness of the subpoenas that the Select Committee issued to Bannon. Bannon quickly appealed after his conviction and has been allowed to remain out of prison for the ensuing 2 years. But U.S. District Judge Carl Nichols, who presided over his trial, rescinded that decision after a 3-judge panel of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals resoundingly rejected Bannon's appeal. Johnson signaled sympathy earlier this month. Earlier this year, Roberts rejected Navarro's bid to stave off jail while it was going on, and I think we've landed back where we started, although there is some additional information, and let's see. Johnson has also been under growing pressure from his own right flank, who want to use their slim majority to undercut the work of the January 6th committee. Matt Gaetz had publicly floated and privately lobbied for holding a vote within the bipartisan legal group, so he got his way. That's a good call on his part. He got them to take this position. They probably didn't even realize that was available to them. And he, so he got that done. And Eric Burleson of Missouri, time for our outro music here. Eric Burleson also filed a resolution last week to rescind the previous January 6th committee subpoenas and try to withdraw the previous Democratic-controlled House's recommendation that it be held in contempt, they be held in contempt. Navarro and Bannon, that is. A vote of the House's legal group, unlike Burleson's resolution, shields moderate Republicans from facing a politically painful vote. We'll see whether Burleson gets his way and gets a House floor vote after all. All right, very good scheming, good work on Matt Gaetz's part. It's a PR victory. They'll be able to claim that Bannon's being victimized. We'll see whether any of the courts entertain it. I guess that decision should already have been made, and the fact that we haven't heard anything about it is, should we call it worrisome? I don't know. In the middle of all these other machinations that the court is involved in, you would think that they just do not want this on their hands and would prefer to wash their hands of it. Steve Bannon is a loathsome figure. They owe him nothing. They're already dragging their feet and doing everything they can be doing for Donald Trump. They shouldn't be doing him any more favors, particularly if they're not even directly for him. Okay, time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, right here, next on Netroots Radio. And, of course, we've got Friday still left to us, too, to try to untangle some of these things and catch up on the avalanche of stories that the SCOTUS stories have displaced.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, lots more to come, of course, and over at Justice Putnam's place, not only has the immunity challenge been hogging all the news at SCOTUS, but all those other cases, but guess what? The Fisher case. Have you heard about that one? It's been flying under the radar, and it could make insurrections great again. Let's stay tuned and find out more about that next.